So, as Tim just said, my background is as a musician, and I also work as a composer, and I've done sound installations, some of which are like long-running, something on measurement of distant quasars for the Norwegian Mapping Authority, which started a few years back and will run for 7 years as a permanent art piece for their headquarters. Also a 10-year piece, or originally a 10-year piece for sculpture in a park outside, or quite far from our university, but we stream data into a computer part from sensors on this sculpture, generates new material, audio material 24/7, streams it back to the sculpture, and you can actually hear both of these pieces online. The reason I say it was first a 10-year piece is that it ran from 2006 to 2016, and now it was recently extended for 10 more years. So, I could talk a lot about challenges on running long-running installations like that, but that's not the main topic. But if you are interested, feel free to ask me about that as well. As my background is as a musician, all the tech stuff I've only learned from the musical need. So some musical creative need creates the need to explore some technical thing. One thing that I have worked a lot with, and together with my colleagues in Trondheim, is live processing, which is, I realize some people are not familiar with it, so I'll explain it. Excuse if you already know. So it's an instrumental activity where we have one acoustic musician and a computer musician processing the sound of the acoustic instrument to such an extent that it changes what the instrument actually is. So this person decides when there will be energy input, what kind of things to put into the collective instrument, and this person decides what it will ultimately sound like. So there has to be like a close collaboration between the two. It's like if you're making a speech and you have someone else changing your clothes all the time. So what you express changes meaning. So as an example of how that might sound with the drums, let's see here if we can have audio. Yeah. One thing that is different from just putting on effects is that the computer musician changes the effect all the time and explores the expression together with the acoustic musician. So, as this is like a purely improvised setting, I'll also show you one example where we used it in a more conventional pop rock setting, where I do some granular processing of the trumpet solo and the piece you're gonna hear, and the processing creates like a shape that follows the trumpet around. So some of the tools that we use for this kind of processing are granular techniques. Obviously, we want to have very flexible audio processors. And one of the tools we have explored are granular techniques that I heard also in the lecture or in the student presentation this afternoon that a lot of people here are into. After reading Curtis Rowe's book on microsound, like in 2003 or 4 or something, I started thinking that all these classical granular techniques that needs their separate audio synthesis engines to be synthesized are really just parameter changes to the same sort of process. So I set out to make like the monster granular generator, which is a new code for C sound called a particle, which is Norwegian for particle. Which is, it has like 42 parameters for a monophonic sound, so it's like not the intuitive thing, but it can do everything, and then it can morph between different granular techniques. As an example of how that sounds, I thought I could play you like a simple morph between some classic techniques here.
Live like a prayer.
So to make this into more of playable instruments, I created this surface with 4 expression controllers and an XY pad. In each of these corners there is a setting of the, and now it's built out with LFOs and random generators and envelopes and stuff, so it's not 42 parameters and no longer it's more like 208. So a setting for the 200 parameters in each corner, but also a modulation mapping of the 4 expression controllers. So the expression controllers can change meaning depending on how you change the state of the whole instrument with this XY. So this is called a hadron particle synthesizer, and you can download it for free if you want. It's written in use and it's C sound running underneath the hood. So that's some background for the current research project that I'm embarking on. I've been working on it for a few months, which is called cross-adaptive processing. And by the way, at any stage, just interrupt me with questions if you want to ask something else. So with cross-adaptive processing, it's somewhat related to the idea of live processing, but here we have excluded the computer musician control. So rather, we extract some features from one acoustic signal, using those features as modulators for the effect processing on another acoustic signal, and then vice versa. So the idea of this is that it will radically actually go into and change how musicians play together. Because whatever you express on your instrument is not just your own words, so to speak, but it's also a controller for the other instrument. And in our experience so far, it also changes how you want to monitor the sound, how you want to listen to the sound of the processing, because maybe you want to hear the other person better. So as opposite to the traditional guitar player scenario where he wants to hear himself louder than everything else, which is not really unnatural because in an acoustic ensemble also you hear your own instrument better. But in this setting, you might actually prefer to hear everything else louder than yourself. So it changes the dynamic in that way as well. As a simple example of some initial musical output on this, I'll play you a piece with Maja Ratche on vocals, Steve Enchensta on drums, where we use just the amplitude of the instruments is simple at this stage, but we have more features that I'll get back to later. But here, vocal amplitude reduces the reverb size of the drums. So there's a huge reverb if the vocal does not do anything. And then once she starts to sing, it's like whoosh. And then in a similar fashion, the drums reduce delay feedback. So the vocals have a delay, and then it is choked somewhat. So what do you think? Is it easy to hear that this is happening?
Well, I mean, now that we know it, I was constantly looking for it, but it's not, if I would hear this, without an explanation, then it wouldn't be obvious what was going on.
Yeah. I agree. And even these were very simple mappings, like very obvious things. The amplitude mapped to big or small sound.
Was the fact that when each one, let's say, brings more input in terms of singing louder or drumming louder, then it actually reduces something from the other player to sort of keep an even, I guess. I mean, was that like a conscious decision? Because then when they both play together, then they both have cleaner sound so that you can hear everything going on.
Yeah. It is something that we are exploring how, and the first thing we tried was that more activity on one make more of an effect on the other one. And it's like, well, that it works for a build-up.
Yeah.
But then it's much more interesting interplay when you sort of can grab parts of each other.
How are you sort of, I guess, what's your setup for this communication?
I'll get back to that
Okay.
shortly.
Cool.
The technical details about it. But when there are some technical challenges to figure out how to build it, but then it's also the musical challenges of how to what to do with this. Once I had the first implementation of the plugins running, it was like, always before when I made some technical innovation, some new instrument, I knew in my head what I wanted it to sound like. But this time it was like opening and closing and all these boxes came out. And I, okay, this is going to be fun, but I don't know what to do. So there's a lot of options. Okay, this project is collaboration between a lot of big universities. We have the Montfort, Maynooth, Queen Mary in London, UC San Diego, where I'm spending the winter now. Nice. Norwegian Academy of Music in Oslo, and NTNU is my home institution in Trondheim. And we have several freelance musicians also participating to try this out in a very practical manner. When we do research sessions, it's basically setting up an interaction scenario and making for musicians to try this out and being able to change the setup quickly to adapt to whatever you figure might be good to try out. And we document these sessions. Actually, they are also live streamed, so if you're interested, I'll send you a link to the next one. With discussions, and even though much of the practical sessions are conducted in Norway, we talk English during the sessions to make it so more accessible. Okay, there is some previous work done on this kind of effects. Most notably at Queen Mary, they have been doing a lot of work on automatic mixing. So that is cross-adaptive effects, more for a production scenario and also for a live scenario. There is also the intelligent audio switch box, which can recognize some features of an audio signal and send it to different outputs. Semantic audio is also related to this project in terms of analyzing features of the audio signal and associating those features with human descriptors like wet, bright. There's not really a mathematical description of what is bright in a timbre, which is unambiguous. There's also some other people like Fasciani, who has done voice control of synthesizer, Stabile, which has he made a system in Maximus P, which is quite similar to what we are building in many ways. But one thing that we really want to do is to put this into a regular production environment, so make it playable in your normal DAW. So some of the challenges here is to extract perceptual features as opposed to more mathematical descriptions. I'm really looking forward to your comments on what we have and what we could have, how could we imagine to extract new perceptual features, and to define perceptual a little bit better. Let's say that we want things that we can say to a performer, do more of this, and the performer can sort of intuitively grasp onto this. And things like the spectral centering, for example, isn't really a performer-related feature that is easy to control. You can do it a little bit, but it's not really stable that way. So we probably need to develop some new feature extraction methods, and we have developed some already. And one of the things we want to do is also to combine features from several audio sources. So the singer and the drummer might collectively influence the sound of the guitar player. So there's some routing questions there on how to accomplish that. We also want for easy experimentation and mapping, so that we can, during our research sessions, can adapt to suggestions and stuff. And then what to control with these modulators is a huge question. I mean, it could be anything. And we want it to be anything. We explicitly did not want to develop custom plugins just for this project, so that even though we will also do that, we want to have the ability to control any off-the-shelf plugin. So then we need to integrate it into a DAW. I'm coming back to your question about how this works together. One of the traditional ways of doing it is via sidechaining, sending an audio signal from one channel to another. We could also have dual mono effects, taking in two different audio signals and mulching them in different ways together, creating one output. But if we want to have more freedom on how these signals interact, we needed to figure out another way of doing it, and there's not really a flexible way of sending controlled signals from one plugin to another in a regular DAW. So what we have done is, or what we want to do is to have several channels through some sort of bus process to several effects. And we do this via open source control. So we have an analyzer plugin living on one track, sending on several network ports. Reason why we are sending on several network ports is that we, on the same computer, want to have several receivers. So each receiver will, on startup, just try to connect to some port. If it manages, or if it doesn't manage to connect, then the port is busy, so we'll go back and try to connect again. And this plugin will receive feature extracted data, do some mapping, and output the control signal, which can be media or open source control. Output from the track and then route it back to the DAW. And then we can use learn features as in any other automation. Yeah, and this is a screenshot of our analyzer, where we have, let's see if we have there's a lot of features that are, not everything is as useful as other things, but these are some of the things that I found more useful. So the amplitude, obviously, transient detection, the envelope crest, which is like the dynamic or the amount of peaks in the envelope amplitude, which tells us something about if it's a sustained sound or percussive sound. Envelope dynamic range, which could be confused with the crest, but it's just related to how loud we play over time. Pitch, obviously, spectral centroid and flatness might be used, but more useful crest, spectral crest, which is also kind of the peakiness of the spectrum, and the flux representing how much the spectrum changes over time. These two, I don't know if you have like intuitively experimented with them, but I know you probably know the maths much better than I do. But what I've experienced when using them is that these two are almost opposite in direction. So, and they are good for determining if it's noisy or a tonal sound. So you can do a shoo, and the flux will go from high to low. The MFCCs obviously are giving us the opportunity to extract more features. One thing that I'm not sure, and please tell me about this if you have input, I'm not sure if anyone has used it exactly this way, is to just take the absolute difference between the first few capstone bands, which gives us some measure of the pressure, like how much tension the sound has. If it's like, it's not very tense, but when it's more pronounced in a way. And that makes one or the other of the first few bands go high. So just by taking the differences, you get a measure of that, which I haven't tested it on a lot of different instruments. Maybe it doesn't work really well on other instruments than local. And then for rhythmic analysis, which is really performer related, it would be easy to tell someone play simple rhythms or play complex rhythms. How would you measure that? So most of the rhythm analyzers I've seen in MIR analysis are based on first finding the pulse, then deducting the meter, and then we start figuring out which kinds of rhythms are these and how are they placed in relation to the meter and the pulse. But let's say we have like the piece you heard with the vocals and the drums. There might be a rhythmical phrase that goes like, and how you can really extract the pulse and the meter, especially not the meter. So how to analyze that? So far I've been looking at the delta times between events and seeing if there is simple integer relationships between them, then there are probably more simple rhythms. That kind of works, but it's a little bit unstable because the deviation of human performance from one simple subdivision to the next might be larger actually than the room the subdivision gives by itself. Like the jazz phrasing of dig 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 dig, right? So that is from straight eighths to very dotted 16th, dotted 8 plus 16th, and everything's in between, and there's like how to quantize this, and the error that you get from quantizing it wrong is huge if you're looking for simple ratios. So then, in addition, we can look at rhythmic irregularity, where the steady pulse is high regularity and any larger deviations. That works quite well, but it's not really something that you would want to play, because if you want to have high irregularity, you would play one long note and one very short note, and then wait a long time again, and it's kind of limited in what you can do musically. Then we have also looked at rhythmic autocorrelation, so taking the amplitude envelope of the signal, doing autocorrelation over several different time spans actually, because to capture a long rhythmic pattern, let's say we might be looking for rhythm patterns of 5 to 6 seconds and see if there's something that is repeating, but that would mean that we don't get an answer from the algorithm until 6 seconds later, which is really late for music, for a musical reaction time. So then we use several different window sizes and overlap them in a way. These measures are not yet really stable enough. We could think that we could look for the highest peak and figure the interval of repetition, and look for the next highest peak and the closest to the highest peak, and then the first peak, and see if there's any grid to be extracted from this, and seeing how many of the events that we have experienced will fall on the grid or off the grid. So there's a gridness feature there that sort of thought out together with the Miller project in San Diego this fall. But since the peaks are moving just enough to make this flaky, maybe it's just as good to use crest and flux also for these kind of peaks. So it says something about, the crest would say something about the tidiness, because tidy and repetitive behavior will to more peaks. And the flux, similarly, how much the rhythm changes over time. Right, so one more thing to look at. This is the plugin that receives the analyzed features, and we can select from all the different features, and we can add together the influence from two different sources. We could, of course, wish to mix more than two sources, then obviously we can, but it's, as a start, it was an okay thing to do. And in this way, we can also scale them differently, and we can scale them inversely, so that more of one and less of the other will actually together get more of the output. Or make them fight each other. And we can have these coming from different instruments. We can have a mapping, so exponential or linear or logarithmic mapping, and well, basically send that out and use as automation controller. Another thing we could do is take the absolute difference between two signals. So if one musician is playing loud and the other is playing soft, then something will happen. But if they both are playing at the same level, it's not. Another thing we've experimented with is sort of a gate or like a snake trigger, where you have you need to have activity over a certain level for the gate to turn on, and then it will stay on until the activity goes below another threshold. And we can have different triggers here. It would trigger, well, that what I just described would be the normal snake trigger. But we can change it so that we use different signals for turning on and off the gate, and then having completely independent thresholds, and also if it will need to be an upwards or downwards trigger for that signal and that threshold. So that might create a lot of exciting things for the musicians to play around with. We can also use this, instead of just having it output a trigger, we can have it control or activate or deactivate another module. So this one just doesn't do anything in itself except decide if some mapping is active or not. One problem with this kind of mapping is that the musicians don't actually know what they're doing until suddenly it kicks in. So it's hard for them to learn how to play the instrument, because you play, let's say you play faster and faster, and then at some point the chip explodes in a massive distortion or whatever. So we have sort of the need to create like a visual feedback for the musicians to have, which might be useful to learn to play at least. But I know it would probably not be a good thing to use during actual performance, to have the musicians tied to some display, whatever. Okay, then the resources that you might find interesting to follow. We have a blog where we write, after each practical sessions, we write a report with the audio files and videos of that session, and we also have a philosopher in the project, so we have discussions on what does this really mean aesthetically. Does it relate to some other kind of perceptual cognition? All sorts of interesting perspectives that this opens. And the code for the plugins is also available on GitHub, so you can just grab it and play around with it by yourself. The audio processing is done in C-Sound. And this is wrapped as VST plugins in via Cabbage, which is, well, C sound front end, so to speak, to wrap it as an ESD. Then I think it's time for me to show you how this works. And I didn't manage to mirror my screen, so I have to sort of move things over here. Let's see. What I have is, I'm not really a singer, but I have this microphone that, just to demonstrate things to you, and I have this simple just wooden box with a contact mic. Not very exciting for myself, but it will enable you to hear the effects quite clearly. So if I turn on reverb, delay, a granular process with the hadron effect that I showed you earlier, this will be applied to this output. So if I make a rhythmical gesture with the vocals, and delays, if I make and a noisy sound, and then I can sort of play around with that singing. Like that. So this is just controlling the aux sense of a mixer. So not actually going into the effect parameters themselves yet, but once we have the automation data, we can map it whichever way we want. So one other thing that I can show you is that on the vocals, I have another of these granular processes which create a stutter effect. And this is, maybe it makes sense to show you the mapper at this point. So this is the mapping effect, and these are the outputs from my rhythmical, the tonal, and the noise. And here you will see the speed I'm playing on this box. So when I'm playing faster, the lamp will turn on and you will have a stutter effect on the vocals. And there's also another channel that is mapped to the tempo of the stutter, which relates to the tempo I'm playing here. So I should turn that up a little bit. Sorry for this mess. Control. And it stays on as long as I continue. Right. So that could potentially be useful. Any questions so far? No. Then maybe I should show you what the analyzer looks like.
Is this always intended for 2 players?
So it's intended for any number of players, but so far we have started exploring it with 2 players.
Couldn't you, play either a keyboard or a guitar, and then have the vocal processing happening and make the corresponding sounds and do all those effects without your hands.
Yeah,
So one person, right?
yeah,
Okay.
like I did now.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right.
Is that me? No. Yeah, so we could, you could imagine using it as a solo performer, one-man band,
Yeah.
extended street performance. But also, that would be, that is, it might add like expressivity to your instrument.
Sure.
And it's also, I think, interesting what happens when you have two different persons, because then it might be a conflict of intention and how to make this work together as musicians. And you might say that, I mean, we're already negotiating a common musical space when you're playing together, so there's nothing new with that. But actually what is new is that you go straight into changing the other instrumental sound.
What are some of the like impressions you get from musicians? Like, but it seems like it would be kind of weird if you're playing something and somebody else changes how your sounds. Like, how would you predict what you're gonna play next if you don't know what it's gonna sound like next?
Yeah, yeah. That is indeed unfamiliar situation, and that's also why I showed you the live processing scenario, because in that setting we are already changing the sound of another instrument, but then it's the musician intentionally doing it and only doing that, which is a simpler interaction scenario. But now there's all sort of things happening, and it's, I think, some musicians will find this highly irritating and really difficult to do. But it's, I mean, it's not intended for, it's not that we want to save the world and everyone should do this, but it's like an option to try some things. Yeah.
It seems like with, I guess the question I always like have been thinking about, how clear are you trying to make the output of one musician affect the other? How clear, because if you, with all the parameters you listed 5 or 6 slides ago, and if you, especially if you do the maximum distance, I feel like it becomes less clear from the amount of the effect that's applied to the receiver, right? Like do you have a target amount of obviousness, or is that decided by the players?
I think that is one of the things that we are exploring, how much can we do, how advanced can we build this interaction scenario before it sort of just becomes
Random, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But it's also like an acoustic instrument like the violin has literally hundreds of different ways to influence the sound. So we can learn, if we can learn that, we could probably also learn this. And the audience will probably be able to appreciate this kind of interaction better if they know and understand what's going on, but then again, they don't have to. You can appreciate a violin concerto without knowing how to play the violin yourself. So it's an extra dimension that they could latch onto if they want to. Yeah.
So do you view this as kind of a communal instrument that all of the players involved are playing? And to that end, I guess in your sessions, is there kind of a period of learning the instrument and learning all the different features you can hit and how you can be expressive with it? And I guess that gets to your point. I guess it would be a longer learning curve for more complex and nuanced, mappings.
Yeah.
Is that what you find?
Absolutely. And even though we have tried to expand the tools with all of these available features and methods of extracting features, during the sessions, we oftentimes go back to just using the envelope. So I think there's a lot of potential to explore that further because it feels like baby steps. We don't really know how to make use of it yet, but it's like if we are 7 years and learning a new instrument that it makes interesting noises, but there needs to be like a few years. So.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it seems like, well, I was wondering what your feedback of, those tried and true, presets, I guess you could call them, that you like or your musicians really like. Because in that first example you played with just amplitude, it did really sound like the musicians were really listening to each other and giving each other space to really modulate the different parameters.
Yeah. And I think that was a very intuitive mapping for them to quickly understand. And these are also musicians that I have played with them for several years in the live processing setting, so they know how effects change their sound. And Maya, the singer, she does her own processing normally as well. But this time we took away all her own electronics, so it was like just the acoustic output. But then I also, when I listened to the output of that specific mapping, I started to think that, we might have some cliches here. So it's like if you play, wow, and it's very gestural and very expressive, but then again, it's maybe something that would become boring after 4 or 5 times. But I don't know, maybe the potential for having cliches is good, because then there is something that you can make recognizable, and if you can make it recognizable, then you can also play around with not making it so obvious.
What's the millisecond delay or the latency here for like an incoming transient?
I think that we are 20, 30 milliseconds or something, because the analyzer does some FFT and there's some latency in that, and then there is the open sound control signal going from the analyzer. It may be more than 30 milliseconds, but actually it will differ a bit between which kind of analyzers we use, and then we can also adjust the buffer size of the audio system, which will affect hugely, because the open sound control signal will only be sent after one audio buffer has completed in the analyzer, and then it will be received by the mapper, and then that will also think about things for one audio buffer and then send it out again. So actually the change in the buffer of the audio system is affects the latency more than usual, because it goes several times. Then again, controlling the FX processing parameters doesn't really need to be that quick most of the time, but it would be nice to have really snappy response possible. So we're fighting a bit against the latency and trying to make it smaller.
What sort of like ensemble have you, like how big, or what, 1-to-1, 2-to-1,
Yeah.
1-to-2, like how big do you sort of, or how many people can you affect with one?
We have, I think so far, it's just a software limit, but I think I made like 4 analyzer channels, because I figured more than that I wouldn't be able to mentally process. But it's really, there's 10 different network ports currently available, so which is more than the number of analyzers, but if we need to have more than one mapper, then each mapper needs a separate port. So but it's all like the scalability is
Forgive me if you said this already, but are you doing any kind of like feedback, like signal feedback, where you're not just taking the, what's coming from the voice, but you're taking what's been processed from the voice, from the drums, and then using that to feed the drums, you know what I mean? Like doing it multiple times, or are you just doing just one direct, or is there a balance between that, or are you planning to experiment?
Right. Currently, we are doing the analysis on the dry signal. It would definitely be easy to add analysis also the processed signal, which will be really, I think might be interesting to explore that.
Some could get out of hand and obviously would get, should get ridiculous, but yeah, I think it would be something interesting to see.
I think maybe once we have learned how to play with the analysis of the dry sound, then we can start to play with the result of the result and sort of build up. Yeah.
For ensemble play, did you try, instead of, A to B and B to A, then have like A to B, B to C, C to D, just sort of this feedback, like a sort of loop going around where each one affects like the player to his right, and then sort of never-ending.
Yeah.
Yeah, where's Matt Wright?
Yeah. Matt Wright is also interested in that.
Yeah.
Similar principle, but different. It's kind of a different application, but
Where each player is supposed to respond to what the other player played, and then you get this loop going on. But here it's similar but different, sure. But,
that'll be interesting to explore, and also the one thing that we haven't actually implemented, but we would like to do is to look at the collective features of a subset of the musicians. So if you're playing in a different register than him, and well, to some extent, this absolute difference between features can accommodate a little bit of that, but maybe it would also be interesting to look at what is the group doing together, and how do you differ from that, and some sort of.
So then you would have, like whoever's playing in the low register would affect the drums, but that could be a different player each time just by the virtue of what they play.
Yeah.
like different parts of a signal go different places, is what you're saying.
Well, I mean, it seems like the roles are interchangeable. You just play into a different sort of subsection, whether within, pitch or rhythm or any of those, and then you're now activating whatever it is. So anyone can sort of go to that area and activate it musically.
Yeah.
Without it being like marked signal or.
Yeah. Absolutely. It requires some mind bending to realize how we should set it up, but it's totally within reach thing. Something that we do in like a side thing to this analyzer and the modulator thing is to look at the dual input mono effects, because then we can do more cross synthesis directly between two signals, which I might be able to show you briefly. Let's see if we have so creating resonators where the spectral characteristic of one instrument influences the other and sort of play. This was we did this with the vocals and drums in a studio setting. I think the drummer really was fascinated by getting the pitches from the vocal. And this also, since this picks the most prominent partials, it will also differ from different formats on the same sound. Hopefully I'll be able to demonstrate now. Here. E. So it's not really, maybe it's not totally predictable, like response, but you can, at least you can hear the general direction. There's room for improvement on that one. Another thing that you might find interesting is what we call a live convolver. And as you probably know, with convolution, you need to know the full length of the impulse response before you start convolving. And then you can partition that to make it quicker, but generally, it's the regular way is to sample the impulse response and then start the convolution process, right? But let's say we can convolve two live signals together. Just would that be nice? So, as an intermediate step to that, we made a live sampling convolver, where we can say. So now I am triggering the convolution with this, right? And anything I say goes as the impulse response. And one, let's try to turn it up a little bit. What is also interesting about this implementation of it is that we can start convolving before the recording of the impulse response is done. And even though this might sound a bit like just sample playback, you know, but it responds to the spectral characteristics of the other signals. So well, that's the things that we have so far, and I mean, just give me input on things that you think that, I mean, features that could be extracted, effects that could be envisioned to be used in this area. Maybe, actually, I promised to show you the analyzer, but I didn't. So, let's enable the display, and you can see some features here is updated quite at a slow rate because, I mean, graphics cost processor power that we don't want to waste. So you have amplitude, ooh, and we have things like flux over here, and the thing about I told you about the mal capturing coefficients, which are here, and you can see that makes it quite a gentle slope. But if it gets more peaky, and then we have the difference here. You know, is this commonly used? Is it like, do people do this?
Do what? Not what I've seen.
Do the difference between the first two?
Like the shape of the MFTCs?
I couldn't hear the question, actually.
Oh yeah,
Fan
so
over I had a fan. I have a dead computer now. Go ahead.
So the first few Malcolmstrom coefficients you see here. Not this one, this is the absolute difference between the first two. So if I make a really relaxed sound, ooh, I have a gentle shape, and if I, it's more peaky. And then if we take just the absolute difference between the first two bands and sum that together, it doesn't matter where the peak is. So that's the idea.
So that's the sum of the absolute differences in the MSCC coefficient across the MSCC?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like it's like a measure of spectral variation of the log magnitude spectrum, the smooth log magnitude spectrum. So you think of the MSCCs as just the Fourier transform of that, it's just a spectrum of the log magnitude spectrum. So you're going to get more absolute difference if you can get a lot of variation. So the more you can make your formants go up and down, the larger the absolute difference. You can also probably push them up out of the range and get a lower absolute difference. So I don't know, what's your upper bandwidth limit?
Yeah. Question is if it would be, the intended purpose was to measure the sort of presentness of a sound, like how much. I know presentness is not actually a known feature, but I think you get what I'm aiming at.
Like how pointy the sound is, kind of.
Yeah, like
The more pressed, the more bright, and that will give you more power. That will increase the absolute difference. Yeah, so you're basically wanting a lot of variation in the catch drum.
Yeah.
So you get that with something periodic. You either can get everything in one. What you want is one giant formant way up high, and then that'll turn your catch drum into a very quick oscillation.
Yeah.
And then you'll get a really large absolute difference. So you want amplitude and you want, bandwidth of the spectrum, and then you'll get. So yeah, you're just manipulating a spectrogram of your spectrogram.
Yeah.
But it's a smooth spectrum, so it's a spectrogram of your spectrum envelope. So you want to, foster variation. The neutral valve should be pretty good. Just should be pretty good with a lot of pressed phonation, because that's the most regular spacing of formants, and you'll get, you'll get a nice big periodicity spike from that. If you can make one formant, you can pile all your formants in one place, then you'll get what looks like an oscillation in the MFCCs.
Yeah.
And absolute difference will get bigger. So that's a fun parameter. So you find it to be quite musically useful?
Yeah, I think, well, I was aiming for something that, when musicians like lean into it more, and with the stringed instrument also they start to push harder, or a guitarist hitting harder or putting on distortion or whatever, as some kind of energy or intent of energy.
Because it's the most standard feature of all, it's the most common feature used in voice recognition. MFCCs are like the main thing in classical voice recognition before they just threw waveforms at neural nets. So yeah, the MFCCs are really good. They're really good signatures of vowel,
Yeah.
formant configuration. So you can really get a lot of mileage out of them by clustering them.
Yeah.
You can detect any vowel, so you can make a cluster space where you can detect whether you're doing I, E, or O, or it'd be a very simple phoneme classification thing on the MSCCs.
Would it be useful for other instruments than vocal? It's like, how will it? I have a feeling of how it works on vocals, but it's hard to.
Well, vocals is the best because you get so much variation in your resonance, whereas most instruments have a very regular spectrum. Most of them just roll off with some slope.
Yeah.
You don't get formants that much. But stringed instruments are great because they've got a lot of resonance structure. But then you can't change them. They're very fixed.
How about brass instruments, like trumpet and trombone? I think they could.
Very regular.
Very,
Very regular roll-off, yeah.
even when they like
All the winds.
overblow and,
Well, that's all at the source. So when you're overblowing and getting beating of a clarinet reed and the nonlinear expansion of timbre in a brass instrument, that's all at the lips. Well, there's also some nonlinear.
well, but then,
in the-
I mean, it doesn't matter, I mean, this doesn't care what happens at the source, it only wants to see a variation in sound. If it's, as long as you can
It
explain
doesn't
it
care
to
where
them.
it comes from, right. So yeah, you could get a lot of variation from your lip reed that would be picked up.
Have you, I see you have 6 MFCCs listed. Have you experimented with higher MFCCs or?
Yeah, I have more of them there. It's just I just displayed those that I thought might be useful. Basically for me, I have been trying to use the display as a way of familiarizing myself with how does the analysis respond to different kind of input, and for the higher coefficients, it was much harder to see what was happening.
You mentioned brightness earlier, just
Yeah.
when you said like words that you can explain to the player but don't necessarily. Do you track that anywhere? Like for example, that would be either, I mean, I guess voice formants or how rich it is, or like a guitar wah-wah or something, you know, open, closing, some sort of, or just, yeah, well, there's, I guess, all sorts of different ways, but just, well, yeah, what were you, I mean, what did you try in that, what did you?
I've been like walking around that problem a little bit, because
Yeah.
I would like to get that measure. And so far, I think I have been looking for the ingredients that could give me that measure, but I haven't been like able to put it together in a way that will work for any instrument. So a lot of the features that we already have work for certain instruments or certain musical situations, but it would be much better if we could have the system levels to say, do it.
Well, yeah, and then I guess there are different cases for pitched instruments and unpitched. Yeah, that's I mean, do you need every one of these measures to be relevant to all kinds of instruments? Does that make sense? I mean, can you sort of solve it for each family of instruments or
Right.
some sort of?
Maybe we have to solve it for each separate, but the ideal situation would be to have some process you could throw in and it would give you brightness for an instrument.
But because maybe, I mean, maybe that concept is different for like percussion than it is for something pitched, right? Because for a pitched one, you would say, okay, this is the bass tone, and then I guess how much overtones or how high do they go? And then for percussion, it's almost just like what you mentioned about like the mean frequency or something.
Yeah, yeah. We have been speculating if we should do like a calibration pass or a learning phase.
Mhm.
So to learn what's the regular situation and how does the performance deviate from the normal.
Okay. And then it would be universal in that you could always teach for whatever thing, but then it would be specific for that, that taught instrument each time.
Yeah, but there is something that I don't feel really comfortable about, because let's say you say to a musician during sound check, play some different things so I can teach the system about you. And then during the actual performance it will normally be quite wild in relation to that. And then maybe the learning process should continue, which technically would be possible, but then the same, like let's say, the same tempo you play would not be the same, make for the same output 10 minutes later, because the system has adapted to you always playing fast, and then you think, okay, I want to go back to that thing we did in the beginning, and you can't because, yeah. Yeah.
So do you have any configurations of I guess, both, instrumentation and mappings that you thought were, really great, or that you thought things really clicked?
Right. We haven't worked long enough to really find a lot of those, but the thing I played with, like the room size and the amplitude, is quite effective. And one thing that we did in the same session was mapping pitch to reverb size. So the vocal is pitched with control of reverb size on the drums, which is completely, it's silly, but it is something very obvious. It's easy to follow for the listener, and it's easy for the musician to do. And the singer was really intrigued by that, because pitch is such a meaningful parameter that you normally use for very specific purposes. And having it like disturbed in this way made her sing in ways that she would never do otherwise. So in that way, it was successful, even though it was not beautiful, or it didn't create immediately attractive musical output. But I think some of the interesting mappings are also things that really destroys the intuitive action. Like when John Cage wanna tell improvisers not to improvise, but to non-deterministic actions within his specific. It's also a way of taking away the cliches of the performer, you could say. Or that's one of the effects of it. A way of getting to places you wouldn't go otherwise. Well, yeah, I think that's